Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cyber Smart Conversations with Harsha. I have with me Jared Bogler, Vice President at Sevil's Toronto office. Jared specializes in office tenant representation, providing comprehensive end-to-end real estate services for office tenants, oversee design and construction of integrated workplace services, and manage real estate for multi-market corporate clients. Thank you for joining. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Harsha. I appreciate the opportunity.
Great to have you, Jared. Jared, one of the questions I always like to start with is to have my guests share their career path. So tell us about your career journey.
Sure. I have a career in corporate real estate on the brokerage side that spans over a 12-year period and three brokerages, frankly. I started in 2008 in September with CBRE in their downtown office. It was an interesting time to get into office real estate. If you can remember back to that time, we were on the precipice of a recession with the U.S. housing market collapsing and the subsequent credit crunch. There was a recession that was coming our way in Canada, and there was fear that would impact the office market. Also, with a wave of new supply coming on in the form of RBC Tower, Bay Adelaide 1, and the emergence of South Core, there was a real fear that the older A-class product in the downtown core would empty out, and that there would be no tenants or demand to backfill that space. Quite the opposite actually happened, because our banks stepped up and backfilled that space with business that they were taking from American banks. And that's when we saw, TD and RBC and others make a real push into the US. And frankly, that's what saved us from some double-digit vacancy rates downtown. Anyway, fast forward to prior to COVID, the downtown market and the suburban markets in Toronto, the GTA, were in very, very good shape and continue to be in good shape. And there's definitely some parallels that can be drawn between that situation in 2008, 2009, 2010 to the situation that we find ourselves in today. My team and I joined my father's team up in the North Office at CBRE subsequent to my time downtown. Wanted to learn from he and his partner, Elliot Greenberg, who both have very differing skill sets. Howard more so on the execution side, and Elliot more so on the business development side. So I really learned to kind of put those two elements of the business together, which is what any successful tenant rep broker needs to be able to do. We subsequently became partners during our time over at JLL for about a four-year period, where we helped them to build their suburban office on Consumers Road. And we wanted to align ourselves with a tenant-focused organization. We have always worked on the occupier side of the business. Not to say that we didn't have any landlord relationships as well, and still do, but we've always been focused on the tenant rep side. And we wanted to make our next step with an organization that was really aligned with that. And Savills was the perfect fit. We've been here now for 3 years. Personally, I've loved our decision to come here. I think it was a great decision. My business has really taken off here personally, and really been able to make a very good go of it. And my clients love the platform. I'm bringing on new clients, it seems, every week, which is great. And I'm thrilled with the move. So that brings us to present day.
This is great. And you have seen a lot of evolution in this space. So today's topic is tenant engagement and experience. Now,
Sure.
if you ask each person what is tenant engagement, you'll get a whole new set of definition.
Yeah.
And tenant meaning has taken a whole new definition in this new what we call post-COVID. So what does tenant engagement mean to you?
There's a few different aspects to tenant engagement. When I think of tenant engagement, I think about how the tenant interacts with the physical real estate itself, and how their employees interact with the place of business. But there's also the relationship between landlord and tenant. and the reciprocal kind of business relationship that emerges out of that. Um, so let's talk about, landlord, the term landlord for a second, because in the GTA, landlord, the way that I'm using it doesn't necessarily mean owner. The ownership group in the GTA is a really small group of office owners, very well capitalized, institutional money, because office is expensive to own and run. And the returns from office product take a long time to accumulate. So you have to have very patient money and patient timelines on that return. So institutional investors are the perfect candidates to own office real estate, but for the most part, their business is not owning real estate, so they have to hire third-party managers, asset managers, property managers, who run the leasing of their assets and run the day-to-day operations of their assets. And these are the ownership, or these are the landlords that tenants are used to interacting with. And I think for the most part in the GTA, they've done a really, really good job of creating a value proposition for themselves and finding different ways to appeal to the tenant from a marketing perspective, from an engagement perspective, in terms of events on site, amenities on site, and different ways to get FaceTime in front and center with their own tenants. And now, so more than ever through the pandemic, and I'll address this a little bit later, tenant engagement has become much more important and has become much more to the forefront even than it was a few years ago. So many of these reps, these leasing representatives, are licensed themselves in the exact same way that I am, which allows them to address their tenants' expansionary needs, their space needs, in a very nimble way. It also gives them the knowledge to deal with these transactions and to deal with me as a broker, because the broker is really the communication conduit between the tenant and the landlord at the end of the day. Yes, these reps are constantly communicating with their own tenants, getting in the door, having Zoom calls with them, meeting with them. But the market itself is a heavily brokered market, at least on the high end. So they rely on people like myself as that conduit for communication between themselves and the tenant, and to foster that engagement.
Yes, and you mentioned about communication. So few months back, I was talking to one of my connect in asset management, and he said many times they see a lack of communication on the tenant side, and on the other side, it's very difficult to track what communication went to the tenant. So I think
Mhm.
that's where the role that you mentioned, it's very important to have that connect.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Yes.
it's exactly the same way, to your point about tracking that communication
Mhm.
and applying it and using that data in a meaningful way. That's what I do on the prospecting side, right? I have a database of accounts that I'm always calling, new accounts, continuous accounts, and I have to track all of that information in a
Yeah.
way that I can reuse it in the future to further my position in that pursuit. It's no different from the landlord side, if they want to interact with their tenants in a meaningful way.
True. So now when it comes to landlord side, why do you think it's an important problem for landlord to focus on?
Mhm. Well, COVID has created a huge disconnect, a huge gap in communication. People have been out of their offices for many, many months. Lockdowns have created a situation where certain companies have been forced to leave. Certain companies have made the decision to leave. Um, so any level of engagement, of communication, is only going to benefit both parties at this point. I also think that the pandemic has forced companies, occupiers, to split their agenda. There was always a public facing and a private facing agenda where, where corporations were concerned and how they're using their real estate and what they're kind of putting out there versus what they're talking about behind closed doors, because real estate can be considered a competitive advantage depending on the way that you use it, or disadvantage for that matter if you don't make the right decision. But now I think COVID has created a situation where the public and private agenda have really kind of gone diverged from each other. Um, companies, decision makers tell me things behind closed doors. That a lot of them are telling me that they want their people back as soon as possible. Certain industries, regulators are preventing that or causing delays in that regard. But financial services, professional services, tech, all of these businesses are just humming right along, and a lot of them want to bring their people back and are bringing their people back. So that communication, that engagement with tenants, from the landlord's perspective, from ownership's perspective, and bringing the broker into the fold is really key in maintaining the value of these office assets moving forward and releasing space.
Now, coming to the tenant side, it's
Mhm.
really important to understand the tenant behavior. And one of the things that we have seen is technology. Technology
Yes.
is needed to bridge the gap between the physical office and the digital workplace. Now,
Yep.
industry has reached to a point where improvement to the physical office environment is no longer the only key thing to enhance the tenant experience. We can say that the rise of tenant experience has also brought the rise of office technology. So you see more and more technologies coming up in the office space. So what,
Yeah.
in your terms, is technology necessary as part of a premium office tenant experience?
Yes. I see companies spending more on technology in their offices than they ever have. That doesn't mean that, I'm saying that they're, holding 40-person in-person meetings in their boardrooms, the way that they used to. In fact, one of the early trends that I've seen, because I am doing new net leasing transactions all the time, whether my client is surrendering some space or expanding or recommitting to a piece of space, those transactions are happening. So anybody that says they're not, I don't think really is in the market. But what I am seeing is, rather than building that 50-person boardroom, they're building smaller boardrooms with more technology. Video conferencing is something that was really taking off pre-pandemic, and is going to be vital for every single company, because what you're seeing is companies are changing their business processes, and relying more on that technology for their business processes. For example, I work with a lot of construction companies, engineering companies. They used to put out bid books for these big fixed bid projects, and they would spend hours, weeks putting these pitches together, and physically putting a binder together to give to the prospective client. And now what they're doing is they're automating that entire process and making it electronic and basically bidding over Zoom. Myself, I think the last 10 pitches I've gone to have been Zoom pitches, and I have to say we've had a tremendous amount of success using Zoom, or other online meeting venues to pitch business. We probably have our highest success rate that we've ever had on pitches in the last 2 years, because we've been forced, or partially because we've been forced, to pitch over Zoom. I think it's a fantastic way to pitch business. VPN is another technology that's been around for a while, but you have to have fantastic VPN access now. People working from everywhere. So video conferencing, VPN, and then when you turn to the building itself, building automation systems, HVAC systems, cleaning staff, they're all becoming IoT based, right? Because that offers economies of scale, it offers efficiencies to these landlords who have, like I said, it's a small group of owners who own a lot of office property in Toronto and the GTA and North America. So they have these big portfolios of real estate. The more they can automate them, the more efficient for the landlord, but also the more potential exposure they have to cyber security threats within their own real estate portfolios.
Yeah, but we have seen like landlords and property management are more involved in the tenant engagement strategies, like providing amenities and services that support wellness. And as you said, IoT solutions mobile apps, concierge services, occupancy sensors, health and
Yeah.
wellness related solutions are coming up.
I'll give
And
you a perfect example. I mean, I just recently purchased my first green vehicle. It's a green hybrid Jeep. And my landlord, I won't name them on here, but they're a great landlord. They installed 2 electronic charging stations in the parking lot. And I drive my car to work fully electric 20 kilometers, and I charge my car while it's at work, and I drive it fully electric 20 kilometers home.
yeah,
And that's on their nickel. That's something they're paying for, and they've brought to the building in order to foster that tenant engagement. They're putting their money where their mouth is with respect to sustainability, which I also respect. And these are the types of things that we're seeing to bring people back to the office. Amenitization of real estate is something that's been going on for a while, but I think even more so will be important post-pandemic.
yes, and I agree with you. Like putting these kind of technologies not only enhance the tenant experience, it's good on the sustainability side.
Yeah, of
Yes.
course. I mean, sustainability is something that has come into play in office real
Yeah.
estate in the last 15 years. Um, a lot of it in new construction, but it's nice to see landlords retrofitting their buildings, modifying their buildings to become more environmentally friendly,
Yeah.
because the office is something that contributes heavily to the carbon footprint. So, as an industry, I think it's incumbent on us to find ways to resolve that. And if some of those ways end up being, attractive to more tenants, all the better.
Yes. And now coming to the impact of COVID-19, we have seen a lot of use on the technology side, but
Mhm.
on the impact of COVID on landlord and tenants, how is it different in different asset classes?
Well, if we talk about the main asset classes, we talk about 4 main asset classes. We have office, we have industrial, we have retail, and we have multifamily. Um, so let's talk about industrial for a second, because it's the hottest asset class by far. It was the hottest going into the pandemic, and the pandemic has only, contributed more towards that, with a heavier reliance on e-commerce, logistics. We're talking about industrial, quote unquote, but what's really driving the demand for industrial real estate is sorting, storing, and packaging distribution of goods that are going on trucks to people's houses at the end of the day. So, the pandemic has reinforced that ideal and accelerated that. So industrial real estate has really, really been on fire, and um, we're now seeing yields on industrial transactions on the leasing side and on the purchase side that are actually outperforming office in certain instances. So it's really an interesting time to be involved in industrial real estate. Retail, obviously took a hit. The larger mall facilities took a real hit for a few months there, but for the most part, those facilities are coming back. Certainly, the well-located ones have retained a lot of their tenants. A lot of retail tenants have closed their underperforming locations and really focused on their well-performing locations and keeping those performing well. Um, so retail is bouncing back. Office, it's taken a bit of a hit for sure, in the form of space coming back to market, because companies are trying to figure out how much space to take going forward, and a part of that process sometimes involves surrendering space.
Mhm.
We had a flurry of subleases come to the market for a period of time. I can tell you that I'm doing transactions all over the GTA. All of the owners that I talk to say that their buildings are busy with tour activity, and I'm very active right now. So um, again, it's that disconnect between what may actually be happening and what you may be hearing in the media. So it's important to find out for yourself and make that distinction and listen to the experts in that regard. Um, And multifamily has been doing very, very well through the pandemic. Yes, there was a slight pressure on rental rates to come down a little bit, but they've already bounced back. And we have 150,000 people coming into the GTA every year, net immigration. So, I don't see the housing market. I don't see the housing market going down. I don't see the need for rental housing going down, and I don't see the pressure on rental rates going down on the multi-res side. So, if you're an investor, industrial and multi-residential are probably your safest asset classes, but they're extremely competitive right now, given the circumstances in the market. So, it's not easy to get in as well.
Yes, and COVID-19 has created a dramatic shift in the way people work. So truly investing in your end users, that's the smartest way to attract and retain tenants.
Absolutely. Investing your time in those relationships, amenitizing your buildings,
Yeah.
staying on top of your rollovers, obviously, and having an open flow of communication between the broker and yourself on the ownership side is key.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jared, for sharing your insights, and it was a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Of course, thank you so much for having me, and hopefully I could provide you with a little bit more knowledge